Am I okay over here?
Yeah, as long as I've got a spot, we're good.
Okay, thank you. Now say, check.
Hello.
Good.
Thank you. You got me now, Robin. Thank you.
And what I'm
Last chance for cookies and coffee. Last chance. Well, not really your last chance, but before we start, okay? I guess by now you all know we had a little excitement around noon today. About 12:15, the fire alarm went off again. On Tuesday, Literature Circle Day. Of course. This was not a planned drill at all. This was not, planned. You could tell everybody was moving fast, getting the babies and children out as fast as possible. And we crossed the street, and then we had a trip to the fire engine to visit and see and watch, and we were cheering and everything, and so anyway, we're all back in. However, I did tell Bob, I said, Bob, this is it, I'm going to fool you. From now on, we're going to have a roaming circle day when we have Literature Circle. You're not going to know what day of the week we're meeting. It's going to be a surprise. No, there wasn't. The engine came and checked everything, or not the engine, the people. And it was something in the circuit. They did have somebody, CPS was here this morning. There was evidently a power outage in the area overnight. And they did have CPS this morning. So I don't know. I'm not saying they did something, but it all happened in the same morning. That's all I can tell you. So, okay. Okay, well, let's start with a prayer this morning, or afternoon, I guess. Lord, we seek wisdom every day. We read books for insight into understanding ourselves and others. We look to history in order to understand our future. We read the Word to know, understand, and live the truth as you have given it to us. Be with us, guide us, and open our eyes to help us see what you want us to see, understand, and believe. Be with those who are not with us today, and be with those who are here today. Open our minds and hearts. In Christ's name, amen. The delicious cookies that you have been nibbling over there are thanks to Ellen Fraser, who brought those. And they're 2 different varieties, so be sure and sample everything. Thank you very much, Jane. And Jane Warren. Where's Jane? There she is. Jane, how are we doing?
We're doing fine. And just so you all know, because you all have been so nice and generous all year, we're doing very nicely. We have been able to pay our speakers, and we've also been able to buy our copies of the books. So thanks a million. Appreciate it.
And thanks for handling all that money, Jane. Collecting, depositing, and for any of you that have worked with getting checks or anything, you don't just write a check and walk out with it in the first 5 minutes, right? So anyway, thanks, Jane, for all your work. Shelley.
Yes. I have the list of books for next year. I hope everyone got one. If you haven't, let me know and I'll bring it to you. There are a few blanks which we are in the process of quickly filling. The Simpsons just agreed to be the reviewers for our November 12th book, West with Giraffes, and then Gates Whiteley has a book. I don't know if you all know that he is an author, and his book is The Holy Spirit, the Air We Breathe, and he will be reviewing that book on December 10th. So I will do an updated list, and we'll wait about 2 to 3 weeks to get the other blanks filled, and Ellen will email it out to everybody. But Gates, I had tried to reach him a while back and could not, and then it just slipped my mind. So I'm so glad you're here today, and you will get to hear from you in December. And the other books I think are all interesting and different, and I hope everyone enjoys some summer reading. And I did want to mention that the fire outside my window was recommended by Walt, and we will be reviewing that in February, and I was hoping to get someone, maybe a firefighter or someone maybe familiar with fires. So if you all have an idea about that, I think that would be helpful in, yes?
Yes, we've been through this before. If you contact the fire department, they will send someone like that. They have an outreach program to the community.
Oh, good.
They give talks all the time.
Great. Wow, you've answered 2 questions then today. Thank you. Well, I will follow up on that. Thank you. I think that would add to our discussion. And March 11th, March is usually when Jane Hansen comes to visit with us. And as Ellen knows, Grace knows, she's not that easy to get in touch with. So I left March open because she usually has a book to suggest that she would like to do. So that's why March is open. And then May, I have a few. I just wanted a chance to read them before I put them on the list. So I think we'll be great. We're off to a great start, and I hope everyone enjoys their summer reading. Thank you.
If only I'd known an hour ago, there were all kinds of fire people here. I could have recruited right then. Thank you, Shelley. I want you to know that Shelley does not put names up on the board and throw darts to pick books. She is reading these books before she recommends them and puts them on the list. So thank you very much, Shelley. I talked to Suzanne last week, the end of the week. The books are all ordered. I don't know, do you happen to know, Morgan, if any have come in yet? She was hoping they might be in by this week, the new reading list.
We can go, I can go look, but I don't know.
It's okay. Feel free to keep checking you know where to look in the library, and I know as soon as they get them, they'll have them over there in that spot. So thank you very much. I am going to say something now to the group that I have not said in my 5 years or more up here. Every book offers something good. I think you'd all agree we get something out of every book we read. I have never recommended a book. I'm going to today. Read Safely Home. Read Safely Home. I think it's later I didn't see where she has it scheduled, April. Debbie Taylor's going to review it. It's an outstanding book. I just would love to have you all read it. Okay, Becca Price. She would like to come up and tell you something fun.
I'm just going to give you a little recommendation for the summer. These are light books. They are not heavy. They are kind of fun to read, and they're the Amish Mystery Series. You can start with one, or you can go through 24. You see how thin they are. They're an easy read. I just wanted to recommend, I didn't know if you even knew anything about them. I just discovered them this year, and I think you would enjoy them. They're light reading for the summer.
Would you repeat the information?
They're the Amish Mystery Series, and they have about 24 of them in the library, so it'll keep you busy.
Thank you.
And she neglected to mention one of the most important things. There's a bulldog named Beans in it. I'm going to put this back up here because the last thing before we get to Ellen is Jane has her refreshment schedule for next year out. I always do September, so I know it's a long ways off, and you don't have to sign today, but it is by the table back there. If anybody wants a specific month, why? We certainly wouldn't want to keep you away from the sign-up sheet. Thank you very much. And by the way, thank you for coming. You know, no matter what we do and plan, without you people here showing up and coming and listening and donating, but mainly being here, it's very important, and we appreciate you all. I mean, next to the reviewers, why, you're the most important people here. So thank you. Okay, Ellen is now going to come up and finish up with her 50 years of history for us.
Good afternoon. I wanted to thank Grace to start with. Last summer, I had a notion that looking back in the archives at what happened 50 years ago, as part of our celebration for our 50th year with the Literary Circle, I thought, you know what? I bet our Literature Circle might enjoy knowing what happened 50 years ago. And guess what? I hear you all enjoy it. So this will be our final look back 50 years, but I do plan, and Grace and I are working on this. I've got another summer project in mind, putting this together into some type of a book to commemorate our 50 years for the Literature Circle. So that's what you can look forward to. We're looking forward to that, you know, having Bob's sermons from 50 years ago and Dr. Zabin's, you know, side by side. That's kind of the notion at the moment. And thank you again, Grace, for believing in this when I mentioned to you last summer. Thank you. So let me start. And so I always start with the sermon titles. I personally find it interesting. The newsletters have a wealth of information, and you'll see May of '74 was just as busy as we are here, May of 2024. So let's look at the sermon titles first. Dr. Zabin had, "What do you do when you can't do anything?" I love his titles. On Mother's Day, "Try a Little Kindness." May 19, Reverend Wood, "The Importance of Doubting Our Doubt." Sounds interesting. "The Day the Lord Hath Made," Reverend Ryan. There was also a salute to the graduates in that bulletin and in the worship service. The sanctuary flowers were to celebrate the 62nd anniversary of the women of the church. And there'll be more about that in just a minute. On May 26, Reverend Zabin delivered the baccalaureate sermon at Alamo Heights High School. And in the newsletter from the Roll Top desk, Reverend Zabin asked for everybody to bring a neighbor for Visitor Sunday, which also was Mother's Day. So May 3, the women of the church hosted and served at the annual May Fellowship Day Luncheon. That was for the Church Women United. That was a group that was San Antonio-wide. That wasn't just here, but they happened to host that in May. The babysitter directory that you've heard about being built, it was created, and the babysitting training started May 4. The White Cross workers continued with bandage rolling and a call for more sheets. And the Women's Council met on May 22, the monthly women's discussion group. The topic was "Some Ideas of the Christian Home." Now, more about the 62nd birthday luncheon. Every May, the women of the church had a birthday luncheon, and this one was the 62nd. The women of the church of the General Assembly, there's a large article on it. I lifted some of the information. It was organized in 1912. And in 1922, they started a tradition, a WOC tradition, for an annual offering from this birthday luncheon. This is an amazing number, $75,000 was assigned for seminars on the role of women today. Now, $75,000 today, that's $450,000 US today. So that's a lot of money these ladies put together. And anything over the $75,000 would go to a special needs Evergreen Presbyterian Vocational School. Now, that was in Minden, Louisiana, and for the past couple of months, you've seen donations going to them. Well, anything over the $75,000 would go to them, and that's 200 challenged children with a goal to extend it to adults as well. There was also planning for the Conference on Women's Concerns, June 13 and 15. Now, you're going to see a lot of information. The May information newsletters were full, just glorious different events for anybody in the church. There's something for everybody, and some wonderful youth events. So, Port Aransas Retreat, 10 couples went with Dr. Wood and his wife to Beachhead. The elders and the deacons had a retreat at Moe Ranch, and that was to prepare for ordination and the written exam Monday, May 27th, and the installation on June 2 with their families. Incidentally, the newsletter mentioned that Moe Ranch had its 25th anniversary. That was 50 years ago. May 19 was an invitation to a happening, that's what they called it, a happening, of learning about learning foundation. And that was at Trinity University. David Pipes, you all may know that name. I know many of you do. Games, food, and youth play. The San Antonio Council of Churches has a seminar on various welfare resources available. Reverend Dr. Wood and Robert H. Seal, we know the Seal family, staff committee chairman, they went to Memphis. There was a downtown churches seminar at First Church in Memphis. And Mr. and Mrs. Edward DeWeese and the church administrators of the General Assembly also went to Memphis. There was an invitation to attend Coping with Stress. That transcends time, doesn't it? We're still doing that. Coping with Stress by Dr. Homer Bain. And that was designed to aid people in time of death and bereavement, as well as crisis situations of divorce, job loss, or physical loss. Transcends time, doesn't it? Here we are 50 years later. That still would be a popular seminar. There was a colloquy on Christian education by Dr. Houston Hodges, and that was to discuss new approaches to teaching and learning in the church. There was a dinner and business meeting for the elders and the deacons. The family dinner on Wednesday night that had the Bible study, that was wrapping up, and I thought this was humorous. Dr. Ryan and Dr. Wood hosted a party for the Wednesday evening study group as part of their wrap-up for the year, and they called it the Wednesday Night Crowds Picnic. There was also planning for the consultants retreat at the Bishop Elliott Retreat Center in Rockport. That was for teacher training. Now, this is an amazing list of what the youth could do, places to go, something for everybody. John Knox, small group rustic family camp, ecology work project. This sounds cool. This is at Palmetto State Park, and that was in cooperation with the State Parks and Wildlife Department. A canoe trip down the Llano River. I think that sounds fun. Moe Ranch had a youth festival May 31st to June 2, and that was with Reverend Wood and his wife. A bicycle camp in Kerrville, and that also had a music festival. A Big Thicket East Texas bicycle trip, and that also included a trip to the Indian Reservation. A seashore conference at the Bishop Elliott Conference Center in Rockport. There's something for everybody here. They're the youth. The youth are the future of our church. I just love this feature, and these were all featured in the newsletter. A horseback trail ride in Kimball County. Bring your own horse. A Colorado backpack trip. A Big Bend expedition. That was 10 days. Wouldn't that be fun? I think that'd be fun. And then the youth ministry had a drama tour. That's an original drama and a production. As I said, there's something for everybody here, and the youth are the future of our church. So in the column from the Woodpile, Reverend Wood, he started out, it's now Dr. Wood. He and his wife traveled to Richmond, Virginia, for him to receive his Doctor of Theology. He already had his bachelor's and master of theology from Union, and his doctoral dissertation was, quote, "The Congregation of Yahweh, a study of the theology and purpose of the priestly document." He also said thank you to his wife and a thank you to Louis Sabinden. And here are his words: his encouragement, his friendship, and his determination to see me through. It's a very passionate letter. And he also said, quote, "Thank you to the three who rendered tedious service typing and correcting my dissertation." He also recognized it was the first Mother's Day for him and his wife with their baby Grace. In Ryan's ramblings, Reverend Ryan used some words I wanted to repeat to you all. Today is all we have. Today is all we can manage. Today is all we need. Now, in the newsletter, they also mentioned First Churchers enjoying Fiesta Week, of course. First week of May was dedicated as Christian Family Week. That was just before Mother's Day. There was a call for all the graduate names, of course, for the newsletter. Now, May 1st, the death of Mrs. Nellie Pascal Walthall. 75 years. We all know her. We know the name. Many FPC family members. That was 50 years ago. In the library news, feature book Real Lace by Stephen Birmingham on the, quote, "sheer grit and charm of the lace culture in Irish families who emigrated after the potato famine in 1845. And I wanted to stop a minute and thank two people, Morgan Fuller and Suzanne West, who helped me get access and learn how to noodle around upstairs in the archive room so I could find all this information. Thank you. May 27th book review led by Dr. Wood. I would have loved to have heard this. Elmer Gantry. Don't you suppose that was a fun review? And looking outside of FPC, just real quickly, the San Antonio mayor was Charles Becker, the governor was Dolph Briscoe, U.S. Senators Tower and Benson. President Nixon was still president, 37th president, but May 9th, the House Judiciary Committee began formal impeachment hearings, and as a note, he resigned in August of '74. Vice President Spiro Agnew, the former VP, was disbarred. There was a Palestinian massacre in Israel, the Malot school, 25 children killed, 68 injured. Genesis 16, there'll always be turmoil, right? Helmut Schmidt became the West German chancellor after Willy Brandt resigned. India exploded its atom bomb. That was the sixth nation 50 years ago. Sixth nation to have atomic power. On May 31st, USSR, it was still called USSR then, had nuclear tests, and May 22 and 23, the US and Great Britain held nuclear tests in Nevada. And of course, another Ted Bundy victim, you've heard of this unfolding month over month, another one of perhaps 100 victims. The first victim was as early as 69. He was arrested in 78 and executed in 89. But that was headlines every single month over month over month. I can't imagine. May 17 was the largest police shootout to date. The Symbionese Liberation Army and LAPD, 9,000 rounds. May 12, NBA champions, the Boston Celtics beat the Milwaukee Bucks. In hockey, you hockey fans, you know I am. The Philadelphia Flyers beat the Boston Bruins. This one, I bet you all remember, I certainly do, the final Dean Martin show. We all loved that, or I think we all did. The final Dean Martin show. And then in conclusion, the top hits. I always have to look those up. The Entertainer by Marvin Hamlish. The Dancing Machine by the Jackson 5. And Help Me by Joni Mitchell. And I wanted to just take 1 minute to say thank you to Grace for believing in me with my project. I really think everybody enjoyed it. It was worth the effort. And I want to make sure you all know how much I love history. And this walk down memory lane was appreciated by all, and thank you all. Loving Christ, loving one another, loving the city, and God keeps his promises. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. You certainly make us feel almost like we've relived 73 and 74 all over again. You know, when she started out, if you'd asked me what was a hit, what was going, you don't know. It's sometime in there, but I don't know what. So it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for all your extra work, Ellen. And of course, her real job is publicity. This other is just extracurricular. And she's the one that stays in touch with all of you. Okay. We are so excited today to have Pastor Scott Simpson joined today by his wife, Suzie, to review High, Wide, and Lonesome. I asked them if they would mind sharing some information about themselves as a couple. Some interesting things that, since we know them, maybe they could give us some interesting things. And they did. They met on a blind date, and this was in Lubbock. And Susie's sister, at that time, worked at the Presbytery office, and she set them up. And I can't help but believe it was God-inspired. Not knowing your sister, but I think she was used on that. And she did a good job. And we're very happy about that. They've been married 28 years. They're blessed with 3 sons, Sam, Zach, and Josh. They've all graduated from university, 2 from A&M and 1 from UT. They served 7 years at First Central Presbyterian in Abilene, Texas. They served another 7 years at Westminster Presbyterian in Topeka, Kansas. And I'm happy to say we are past the 7-year mark, or I'd be getting worried. We're now at 17 years here at First Pres, and we're certainly happy to have you. I'm going to just turn it over to you now. I think everybody's waited long enough to hear about High, Wide, and Lonesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shelley and Grace very kindly allowed us to pick our own book. And so that's the book that we're reviewing today, one that I read about a year ago. And when I found this book, I was in a bit of a reading drought. And if you've ever been in one, it's probably because you've just read a book that was really, really good, and everything you come across is just not quite measuring up, right? Well, the subject caught my attention because it's about a part of the country I've always been curious about. Numerous car trips across eastern Colorado as a family had heightened my interest in a book that described, dry scrub and miles of prairie? But it was clear early on in reading the book that I'd made a wonderful choice to end the drought. Hal Borland does a masterful job of describing, through his eyes as a boy, the beauty and wonder of the Colorado wilderness of the High Plains. He filled in every sketchy idea I had about what that part of the world was like with the beauty and wonder of the Colorado wilderness of the High Plains. He filled it with amazing colors of a sunrise on the Colorado prairie, the vivid images of what it was like to build his family's homestead next to his dad. And he provided a view of an incredible landscape that nurtured their family's devotion. When you add to that the personalities of all the animals, I hope that you guys did get to read it and enjoyed that part. That was my favorite. I just knew this was a book I had to share with you and with Scott.
Ellen, would you mind if I moved your laptop?
So long as we can keep this up here, so hold on one
Oh,
second.
I hope that
Let me
didn't-
slide it.
Hope that didn't mess that up.
Okay, hold on. Let me slide this way.
While Ellen's doing that, I'll tell you something about our date. You remember the blind date thing? Yeah. I'd never been on a breakfast date before. I had my doubts. I was nervous, which was, I thought, perfectly normal anyway. Suzie asked me to pick her up at her sister's home in Lubbock on one morning at 9 o'clock. That meant, I had to get up like 5:30, 6 o'clock, because everything's 2.5 hours away in Texas. You know that, right? But she said, before you arrive, I need you to call and tell me that you're here. And I said, sure. So I arrived on Quaker Avenue at a Shell station, gas station. And I didn't have, my cell phone's back there next to Suzie. I didn't have a cell phone, but I had a beeper. I hated that beeper. And I got out and I had some quarters and I went to call on it. The phone was busy. I didn't panic. It was about 8:45. I said, I'll go inside and get a cup of coffee, come back out, and just wait. So it was 5 of 9, and suddenly the line disappeared, and there was the phone waiting for me to call one more time. And I said, okay, Lord, either it's busy and she'll have to forgive me, or I'll connect with her. Well, it was busy. Later learned that our nephew, Adam, had unplugged the phone at the house because he knew, is that correct? He was playing with the phone, but wasn't part of the story he was trying to prevent another guy who was, well, this sounds good anyway. I like that part because I thought he's trying to make this happen. So anyway, I got to the door, and Suzie was wearing a peach blouse and jeans, and I melted. I had a hard time saying hello. Great date. We got to the restaurant, and it was a hole-in-the-wall Mexican food restaurant that they serve tacos. The menus on this board that's handwritten out, that kind. And they only take cash. And we're in this long line of Texas Tech professors and students. And Suzie goes, well, how do we do this? I said, what do you mean? She said, who pays? I said, I'll pay. So I got my wallet out after we ordered, and just like today, there's nothing in it. I was so embarrassed. She paid for breakfast, and we stayed about 4 hours. It was at least that long. And then she bought lunch, too. And then she went to the airport, and then we started dating. And 6 months later, we were married at First Central Pres. Like 800 and something people there. It was crazy. Thanks for letting us review this book. Thank you, Suzie, for recommending it. I thought it was a great book. I've never read Hal Borland before. I'll start out by saying the late Frederick Jackson Turner, he was an outstanding historian and scholar, wrote the renowned paper, The Significance of the Frontier in American History. In this fabulous work, Turner concluded that the existence of the frontier was crucial in shaping its character and democracy. According to Turner, the untamed and unconquered nature of the wild frontier reshapes the character and molds the lives of those who venture into it. Ultimately, the American frontier tames the colonists and teaches them lessons about life, endurance, gratitude, joy, hope, and new life. On the first page of his foreword of his book, it's a great foreword. He writes, by an accident of time and place, I grew up on an American frontier. High, Wide, and Lonesome is a story of the American frontier and pioneering as Hal Borland and his mother and father experienced it. And so for purposes of this review, I'm going to review the following areas: the setting and the characters, literary appreciation and plot. I'll explain that in a moment. And then finally, a recommendation. First, the setting. Borland defines the setting in the foreword. The title of his book, High, Wide, and Lonesome, was approximately, he said, this 200-mile square, which was an arid, treeless, short grass upland with a few live streams located in the frontier of eastern Colorado. Section 17, a section, those of you who've been familiar with farming know that's 640 acres, right? And that's where Hal and his parents built. He was in the north half, and that's where they built a homestead. The Borland's homestead was located not far from the towns of Brush and Gary. And so he asked, how far is that distance when you're riding a horse? According to Borland, traveling to Brush was about a 10-hour round trip in good weather. Whoa. In bad weather, that round trip took all day. The nearest telephone and post office was 12 miles away in Gary. The nearest doctor was 30 miles away in Brush. The closest neighbor was 2 miles away. The year of the Borlands settled on the homestead was the spring of 1910. Hal Borland's family consisted of his father Will and his mother Sarah. Before I describe Hal's father Will, it's important that I mention his father, Hal's grandfather Will, who greatly influenced his son Will's dream of building a homestead. Grandfather Will Borland was a casual farmer, but by trade he was a blacksmith and a millwright. And with his wife, he helped raise 7 sons, and one of them was an editor. Later, I'm going to bring grandfather Will back into the review. Borland's father, Will, was that editor. Will apprenticed himself to the village printer. This is Hal's dad we're talking about. And eventually became a master printer and part owner of a weekly newspaper in a little town in Nebraska. Will caught the urge, like so many homesteaders, to move west and had the dream to own his own land, be his own boss, and become a farmer on his own homestead with his family. So Will sold his house, sold his share of the weekly newspaper, and told Sarah, his bride, that they would move in the spring. And when they arrived in eastern Colorado, in Brush, Will rented a small green house for a temporary home, bought a team of horses named Dick and Shorty, great names, and a wagon, a couple of cows. One of those cows' name was Bessie, and a dozen chickens. Will and his son Hal left Sarah at this home in Brush one morning, and they made their way to the homestead to build a sod house and dig a well. Sarah, Hal Borland's mother and Father Will's bride, was a strong woman. Her character starts slow at the beginning, but as this story goes on, she stands out. She glows, I thought. I called her the very center and heart of the family. When things were working well for the family, especially when they were not, Sarah held the family together with her creativity, her courage, her determination, her toughness, hope, and love. I like this because I was never good at it. Sarah made and sold butter she made from the milk she got from Bessie. Sarah was also a great mother, too. She watched out for Hal and as he grew up on the plains wilderness, especially when Will was away working in Denver or Brush as a printer. Whole series of other important characters. Tom McDowell, the storekeeper in Gary. That's where the family went and bought supplies. Jake Farley, the Borland's closest neighbor and friend. And he was very encouraging, very supportive throughout their stay in the homestead. John Garrity, a longtime sheepman who owned most of the land and most of the sheep you saw all around eastern Colorado. He was not a good neighbor in encouraging and help the Borlands grow their homestead. He was one of those who wanted to encourage the Borlands to leave, because that's what all homesteaders do. They eventually give up and they quit. Louis was a sheep herder for John Garrity and a shoemaker, and he provided help and support to the Borlands by giving them access to gathering sheep chips. You know what that is, don't you? Yes. to burn for fuel in their house, repairing their shoes, and giving Hal and his family a new puppy named Fritz. And they became a very good friend. Jack Clothier, he was a local cowboy in his late 20s. He worked for the Lazy Fork Cattle Ranch, not far from the Borland's homestead. Although Jack did not start out as supportive, allowing the Lazy Fork cattle to wander into the Borland's homestead and eat their hay and stomp their cornfield, he later turned out to be a great friend and support for the family, especially for Hal. Pat Thompson was an old horse ranchman. He'd been there forever. He glared at the homesteaders and called them damn fools, but who Hal understood had a sense of time and space and maybe even some destiny. Con Hallahan, he was a stage driver who had the star mail route between Gary and Brush. He hauled freight, and especially that important Christmas package from Nebraska, and sometimes some passengers. Emily Woods, she was a homesteader who roused a lot of speculation. John Krause, a cruel, evil homesteader who was eventually stomped to death by his own horses he physically abused. The Bromleys, who welcomed the Borlands as neighbors and eventually became good friends with Hal and shared the books they had in their libraries. And then George Grant and Jim Walker, homesteaders whom Hal remembered, but they didn't last. And then that was it. Second, literary appreciation of the author and the plot. Now, normally when I review a book, I include what I call literary criticism. This is what pastors are taught to do in seminary when we're learning about how to build a sermon, is critique the author's literary work. I couldn't call it literary criticism this time. I had not even one word. Instead, I chose to appreciate Hal Borland's literary skill. Let's be honest. This is a great book he wrote, a great book. He has a gift of making memories of his upbringing suddenly spring to life through his vivid description of nature and its connection to the people he remembered. And I just want to, chapter 1, just one example. Chapter 1, page 1. When Father and I started out that late April morning, it was like the dawn of creation. So sweet and clean and crisply damp cool, all along the first 2 miles south from town, the blackbirds in the big cottonwoods ka-cheed among the jade-flaked leaves no bigger than a ground squirrel's ear. The blackbirds themselves were like gems, jet set with ruby and gold, the red wings and the yellow heads, all ka-ching in the sun, not a half an hour high. And in the roadside alfalfa, silverly blue-green and new leaf and dew, was a jackrabbit in and from the sand hills for breakfast, the sun making his long black tip ears pink as rose quartz. It was all spring and new beginnings, a morning to be alive and laughing. Isn't that wonderful? Many more examples. I encourage you to find those examples. As an author, I appreciate that Hal had a keen eye for nature in the fascinating way he showed us how it was connected to human life. What a joy to read. Now, the plot. What's the plot? That's the main part of the story. That's what happens to the characters, right? What I'd like to review with regards to plot are several really great, what I call great stories in the book that Hal shared that highlight how the Borlands were impacted and how the family responded. So, first in chapter 5, Hal and his father were headed home from Gary, and Hal noticed his father was strangely quiet on the ride home. Problems, he knew, had been eating at his father Will, and eventually started remembering his grandfather Borland, Will. Hal's father Will told a story about his grandfather that Hal had never heard. Hal's father described how his father went through some pretty tough times in Nebraska. At first, Will's father and his wife had 7 children, and then his wife died. Then Will's father remarried. I didn't say this earlier. He brought her to Nebraska, and they had 9 more children, 16 children in total. Bless their hearts and souls. Couldn't keep them in shoes. Will shared, but he gave them a roof over their heads, and they never went hungry. Later, Will told Hal how tough his father was in the shop and how he almost cut off his hand with an axe but kept on working. Hal received comfort from hearing his father tell about his grandfather, Will. Hal reflected that his father was, quote, rallying his own pride and strength, end quote, and rallying himself to stand up to a circumstance in the way of your kind. Hal writes, when a man or a people forget where they came from, this is a quote, and no longer look back with pride on their beginnings and confidence in their own blood and sinew and belief, that man or people is doomed, end quote. That's really good. This story shed some light on why Hal's father left Nebraska and took his family into eastern Colorado frontier wilderness. Second, in chapter 6, Hal and his family were celebrating Thanksgiving. After living 7 months on the homestead, Hal writes to us, it was like a Sunday in the middle of the week. But we were more thankful than usual that year. As we sat down to dinner, Father said, I don't know about anybody else, but I think we're pretty lucky. Family had their own house, their own land. They had plenty to eat, even after some rogue range cattle, remember what I shared earlier, had stomped and eaten their new cornfield, and none of them have been sick. Later, the family sat down to play dominoes, and that's when they laughed, and they had fun. It was a family bond-building time that they all shared. Then third, in chapter 8, on a Sunday afternoon after dinner, Hal asked his father if he could ride Dick, one of their horses, while Hal was bringing both horses in. So Hal took the riding bridle and went after Dick and Shorty, grazing on a flat somewhere about a half a mile from the house. Hal put a corn cob in his pocket to persuade the horses to come in, and after a brief chase on the flat, Dick gave up and ate the corn and let Hal bridle him. Hal was thrilled at this, that he could get on Dick, but Shorty wasn't interested one bit. Hal and Dick chased Shorty on the flat. Then Dick decided it was time to race. Hal couldn't stop Dick. Dick was running as fast as he could behind Shorty, who quickly came upon a mud hole, a gully. Shorty made the jump okay, and so did Dick, but the bank gave way to Shorty's jump, and then Dick's head went down, and Hal went over that head, was thrown over the head, and Dick did a somersault over Hal while he was under him. Hal broke his ankle in 2 places in extreme pain. His mom and dad quickly came to the rescue, brought Hal to a young doctor in Brush, who splinted and bandaged Hal's ankle and gave his mother a dozen pills to parse out to Hal to deal with the pain. This story showed me how the family responded to an accident with courage, comfort, and love for Hal, even though it was really scary for everyone. Fourth, in chapter 9, the Borland family experienced their first drought. Even though it was very dry, the sod, corn, and beans came up because of the moisture underneath the sod. But the blue stem grass growth was slow and the gullies were drying up. Even though Hal's father was worried, the family wasn't broke. Hal's mother was still selling butter in Gary. Later, the blue stem grass would grow taller for hay, but it remained short because it was too dry. And the family needed hay. Hal and his father cut 2 draws of blue stem grass that produced only 2 small stacks. So they went around and searched for more grass and found some and cut it and raked it and made hay. Later in chapter 12, I'll mention it, we'll learn how serious the drought impacted their harvest of their garden, their food, the beans and the corn and other vegetables, and how the family endured the drought and used what they could to make hay to feed during the winter months and continue to produce income for the family, thanks to Sarah. That was insight we gained. Fifth, at the end of chapter 9 and the beginning of chapter 10, the Borland family was presented with new work opportunities. Hal's father, Will, first was offered an editor's job in the mountains if he wanted it. Following a good family discussion on whether or not to stay at the homestead, Will took the job because it was temporary and they needed the cash at the time. Second, Hal was offered a well-digging job by neighbor Jake Harley for, you remember the evil guy, the evil homesteader, John Krause. Hal accepted the job. He was thrilled at this opportunity, even though his mother was a little hesitant because she wasn't sure about this fellow named John Krause. Hal immediately went to work, and everything went well until both Jake Farley, neighbor, and Hal witnessed John abusing his animals. John yelled at the animals, beat them with a club, killed his cat, and hung his dog. What's wrong with this guy? But eventually both Hal and Jake had seen and heard enough, so they quit. And this story helped me learn about how important work and getting paid was to both Will and Hal, and also that sometimes working for someone evil doesn't mean that evil defines all life. This was a growing up moment for Hal. Hal writes, quote, "Finding that stein beside the old trail gave me a sense of the reality of the search others had made for the substance of their dreams. And it made that search worth the ache, the pain, the hurt, and even the evil." Hal learned that those dreams of his father Will would eventually become his dreams, and he too would follow in his own father's footsteps and take up that search. And then sixth, in chapter 11 and 12, we learn about Bessie the cow and Dick and Shorty's unexpected death due to grazing some death camas, which was a weed. And how did Hal know about the death camas? Well, he learned it from Jack Clothier, the cowboy, who taught him about that. This was devastating for the Borland family. Not only was the transportation ground to a halt, but the food for the family and the ability for Sarah to make butter and sell that butter had ground to a stop. Sarah and Hal told Jake Farley about the death of their cow and horses, and the next morning, out of all their grief and pain, Jake took Sarah and Gary to buy a new horse and buggy. Mac, I believe, was the horse's name. And she drove it home that night. Later in chapter 12, Will the father came home from his work, but didn't look so good. However, he was home and he wanted to help with the harvest. Hal writes, "Father did the milking and I got in the hay, and the drought, the poor corn crop, those wrinkled little beans, the skippy haystacks, even the deaths of the horses and the cows didn't matter the way they had yesterday. Instead of that, Hal looked around at the barn, slapped Mac, their new horse, on the rump, and looked in the corn bin and said, 'You got a little corn, didn't you? Next year, we'll get a real crop.'" That night during supper, which wasn't much of a meal, and it wasn't about what they ate or how much, it was the way they all felt. The Borland family was together again, and they knew they could handle it. They had rough times, but it would be better. This story revealed to me that out of difficulty and hard times in the Borland family, a new perspective was born, made up of resilience, endurance, gratitude, and hope. The Borland family was strengthened once again. And then seventh, in chapter 13 and 14, that's where we read about Father Will, becoming sick with typhoid fever. Both Hal and Sarah did their best to take care of Will, but he needed the care of a doctor. So Sarah took Will to an older doctor in Brush, where he fought for his life, tooth and nail. After 6 weeks, Will overcame dangerously high fever and delirium. And even though he was gone and weaker, he smiled his first smile, and Sarah and Hal had hope because they knew Will was finally going to make it. He was going to live. While they were visiting Will in the hospital, neighbor Jake Farley milked the cows and took care of the homestead. What gave Will hope? I think it was hearing his wife, Sarah, say, "Will, you're going to get well. I had this typhoid like this and I got well. Do you understand?" After Will returned home and got stronger, he was grateful to be alive. Even more, he became more determined not to give up, not to quit the homestead, thanks to another visit by the old horseman, Pat Thompson, who told him again he would leave. Pat's visit made Will mad and determined. This story provided insight to how important it we all need to hear hope and have a little determination in life. Soon thereafter, Will was offered another print job. This time it was in Brush. Even though he would be away 30 miles from the family, he would make money to pay off the debt he owed the doctor in Brush for caring for him, and he did just that. Then eighth, in chapter 15 and 16, we learn that Will came home from his print job, work in Brush, in time for Christmas with the family, except this year, because they had to pay off the debt they owed to the doctor, the Borland family told Hal they could not celebrate Christmas. This news hit Hal very hard, but the Borlands had the best Christmas gift of all. They were together. Hal ached for days about not celebrating Christmas, but he learned to accept the ache and pain. Next year, things would be better, and they would celebrate Christmas. There's that perspective again. That year, the Christmas box arrived from the extended family in Nebraska that they would all enjoy. On their way home, the Borland family sang. They were all singing. It was Christmas Eve, and they were singing because they were joyful and grateful to be together in spite of everything that had happened to them. On Christmas morning, the Borland family opened the big Christmas box from the family in Nebraska, and Will surprised Hal with a gift, a 12-gauge shotgun. It wasn't a brand new one, but nevertheless, it was a 12-gauge shotgun, and Hal realized he had entered, his dream was finally met, and he was entering manhood. In chapter 16, Will returned to Brush for work, and a terrible blizzard hit the Borland homestead. And Hal wanted a blizzard to come, but maybe not this kind of blizzard. The wind howled and the snow blew for days, creating drifts that were way taller than me. Hal and his mother stuck together and focused on feeding and caring for all their animals who depended on them. Eventually, they survived. The wind and the snow stopped blowing, and the thaw began. Winter was almost over. Both of these stories taught the importance of gratitude, joy, and endurance, the sticking to it. Finally, in chapter 19, during a moment when Will and Hal were together looking out over the flats before supper, I thought this was a really important moment for Hal and his father. Hal noticed his father was smiling, a deep inside smile. Hal wanted to tell his father about all the experiences he's had when he was gone. But when he saw his face, Hal knew that his dad knew. Hal knew something more important. His father had an inner certainty, a belief. And you'll find this on page 242. I was to know that quality better and better in him over the years, but I sensed it then. In summing up what there was to show for 34 years, he omitted the one position that mattered, the certainty, the belief. Take away everything else, and that remained. He had been forced to a decision between the dream and the responsibility, not knowing until the decision was made that there is no choice, that the dream encompasses the responsibility, or there's no dream at all. That was the distillation of the homestead years, as it was the distillation of the frontier through all the years. The pioneer started the dream, with the dream, and the unique achievement was his persistence in the dream, even while he met his obligations to self, to family, and to society. Hal learned an important lesson that day by looking at his father's smile. Don't ever give up on your dream, even while you're taking care of yourself, the family, and others. In chapter 20, the Borland family celebrated what I thought was the best Thanksgiving ever on the homestead because there was no more hardship anymore. The major troubles were past. Together, they made a decision to stay on the homestead, and they did it. They made it work. Now they experienced freedom. Now they could look into the future and decide what's next. What did they learn? Daddy Will wasn't a farmer. He was a printer. His dream was to move to a growing town with his family and become a printer. Times were changing then. An era was ending. So Will proved up on the homestead, got his legal title to the land. That year was 1915, and the Borland family moved to the growing town of Flagler. Will bought the Flagler News, became a great country editor. Hal followed in his father's footsteps and eventually learned that the frontier is never a place. It's a time. It's a way of life. Hal came to learn that frontiers pass, but those frontiers endure inside all of us and the people who live them. If you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. It is an easy read, and it's a memoir. It's a historical autobiography, but it's so personal. It's so warm. Great writing. Together, this man and his family endured many hardships and overcame each one. Together, this man and his family learned that even though life can have aches, pains, evil, and hardship, there's much more to life. This man, Will, and his family had a choice. They could allow the hard and difficult experiences to make them into hard people. just like John Krause. But they didn't. Instead, their character and their life was transformed by their experiences, and they did learn the important lessons of life: gratitude, endurance, joy, hope, new life. Those are lessons we all need to learn and share together in our own families and our own church family. Thanks again, Suze, for recommending the book. Thank you, Literature Circle, for inviting both of us to review this book, High, Wide, and Lonesome. Any questions? I didn't write any questions this time.
Scott, at the end, when they get into the newspaper business, did the newspaper thrive?
The Flagler News, are you referring to that? Yes, if I recall correctly, there's just a brief piece on that. And I think, of course, I said this, Hal became a pivotal part of it. It was a growing little city, if I recall, about 600 people, little town. I didn't grow up in that small of a town. The town I grew up in was about 3,800 people. That would encompass about our neighborhood. Yeah. Hereford was a bigger city, Hereford, Texas. It smelled like all get out, but there was 14,000 people there. That's where I grew up. But as I remember, it thrived. It was like one sentence he referred to this fact, and then Hal went on to school, a state university, and then he became a really great writer too. So, thank you for that question. Yeah. Anything else? He has, and Walt knows. Walt recommended a book. Was it When the Legends Die? Is that the one? Yeah, Susie's got it. She's got it back there. The Dog Who Came to Stay. Hint, hint, hint. Hint, hint. You know, I could have focused on Fritz. Fritz was amazing. I think if you read the book, this dog fought with rattlesnakes. He almost didn't make it. The dude got bit in the lip, and he survived. In those days, you're doomed if you get bit by a rattlesnake that far from a dog. But the dog survived. Wow. Killed a lot of rattlesnakes. I've seen some big rattlesnakes in my life. Not recently, but on the farm, I'd see snakes like they were seeing. They are scary. They get into pipes, and you'd be moving pipes, and then the snake would come out, and it'd just keep coming out. As long as these chairs. What do? You go away. We would kill those snakes, my dad would, and then hang the snakes on the barbed wire fence for them to dry, and then skin them and sell the rattlesnake skin to make boots. That'll teach you, snake.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just have to ask a question of the rest of you. Did any of the rest of you, when you were reading this, I mean, I'm talking a totally different geographic location, time period, did you think of the Waltons? Yes. Yeah, and I think it's because of the family unit and the struggling and how they handled it as a family and all, but so many good memories of all those years of listening to the Waltons, so.
And they didn't know they were poor.
No. Happiness was not described that way. No. So I don't know, but it was very good, and it's just a good, warm feeling, and I think a lot of that probably is because it was so well written too. It's good.
I think the last thing, one of the, in the chapter toward the end of the book about the terrible blizzard, and when Hal
Yeah. And yet they had solutions for things. You know, they came up with things to do to solve the problem, you know, so very good. Well, thank you so much again. Looking forward to next year. Thanks to all of you. Have a wonderful summer and happy reading. Thanks again for coming.